Imagine stepping into a 14th century Parisian bathhouse, the air so thick with steam you can barely see your own feet. The wooden door creaks, and you're hit with a wall of heat, a sour tang of sweat, and the chatter of a dozen voices, nobles haggling, merchants boasting, and washerwomen barking orders. Tubs line the stone floor, their water sloshing as bathers dunk in, oblivious to the grime clouding the surface. This is no spa day. It's a medieval stew of bodies, where cleanliness is a gamble. The bathhouse is the heart of the city, a place to scrub, socialise, and maybe catch something worse than dirt. You weave through the crowd, dodging a splash from a bather who's clearly been here too long, his skin prune-wrinkled and pink. The water, same stuff used by the last 10 customers, now a murky broth of hair, scum, and who knows what. They call it hygiene, but you'd call it a petri dish with ambitions. The bathhouse keeper, a wiry woman with a scowl, ladles more hot water from a cauldron, sending up clouds of steam that sting your eyes. She's seen it all. Drunken brawls, sneaky trysts, even a priest who swore the water was blessed before slipping on a slick board. You hear the clink of coins as bathers pay for entry, the price of purity in a world where filth is free. Over there, a merchant scrubs his armpits with a rag, singing off-key while a noblewoman dabs rosewater behind her ears, pretending she's above the muck. Spoiler, she's not. The water's a great equaliser, turning everyone into stew ingredients. You gag as a whiff of something foul, maybe the water, maybe the guy next to you, cuts through the steam. They say bathing keeps the humours balanced, but one dunk in this soup, and you're betting on plague over purity. Yet, the bathhouse buzzes with life. Deals are struck over splashing water, gossip flows faster than the Seine, and for a moment the city's chaos feels tamed. You spot a kid tossing pebbles into a tub, giggling as a bather curses. The scene's absurdly human. People chasing cleanliness in a world that laughs at the effort. Historically, these bathhouses were everywhere, from London to Florence, until the Black Death made folks rethink shared tubs. National Geographic notes they were social hubs, not just for washing but for bonding, scheming and surviving. Still, you can't help but smirk at the irony. They scrubbed to stay holy, but the water was anything but. You step back, the steam curling like a ghost, and wonder how anyone thought this was a good idea. Clean? Sure, if you squint and ignore the slime. Like, share. Tell us your creepiest medieval fact. Would you dare dip in this tub? Picture yourself in a bustling London bathhouse, 1350, where the air's a swamp of steam and ambition. The nobles get the prime tubs, private, curtained, with servants pouring herb-scented water that's almost clear. You, a commoner, are elbow deep in a communal vat, shoulder to shoulder with a tanner who smells worse than his hides. The water's a greasy grey, slick with the day's clientele, and you're pretty sure something just brushed your leg. Nobles sip wine, their laughter floating over the splash of your neighbour's frantic scrubbing. Cleanliness is class warfare, and you're losing. The bathhouse is a microcosm of medieval life. The rich float, the rest of you sink. You glance at a noblewoman, her silk robe draped nearby, as she soaks in a tub sprinkled with lavender. Her servant fans her, keeping the steam from ruining her braid, while you dodge a stray elbow from a butcher who's turning the water red with grime. The nobles pay extra for fresh water, but even their tubs are just a few uses cleaner, medieval recycling at its finest. A knight in the corner boasts about his crusade, his tub a throne of suds, while you grit your teeth, scraping dirt with a rag that's seen better days. The bathhouse keeper shouts at a kid stealing soap, her voice cutting through the din. You'd laugh, but you're too busy avoiding the tanner's splash. National Geographic points out these bathhouses were social equalisers, sort of. Everyone bathed, but status decided how much scum you shared. The stench of unwashed bodies mixes with the faint whiff of herbs, a cruel tease of luxury. You hear coins clink as a merchant upgrades to a private tub, leaving you in the communal slop. Superstition lingers. A woman mutters that too much bathing weakens the spirit, but she's here anyway, scrubbing like her soul depends on it. The nobles, though, treat it like a ritual, their servants chanting prayers for health. You roll your eyes. Prayers won't clean this water. The scene's a chaotic blend of hope and hypocrisy, everyone chasing purity in a world that's anything but. A commoner next to you jokes, "This tub's got more life than the Thames," and you snort, because he's not wrong. The bathhouse hums with deals, flirtations, and the clatter of wooden buckets, a gritty snapshot of human stubbornness. You dunk your head, praying you don't surface with a rash, like, share. What's the grossest bath you've taken, medieval or modern? Step into a 14th century English manor where the clatter of trenchers and the hum of prayers signal dinner's start. Before anyone dares touch the bread, there's a ritual as sacred as Mass. Hand-washing. You stand in line, a chipped basin before you, its water cold enough to make your knuckles ache. A servant pours from a dented ewer, the trickle barely cutting through the grime on your palms. The lord at the table gets his own gilded bowl, of course, while you share this murky puddle with a dozen others. Hygiene's a performance here, half devotion, half desperation, and you're all playing along, scrubbing like your soul's on trial. The water's already cloudy. Someone's been at the plough and it shows. You grimace, but dip in anyway, because skipping this means scandal. The room smells of roasted mutton and wood smoke, but the basin's got a whiff of earth and sweat, a reminder of the fields you left behind. A priest mutters blessings over the water, as if words could purify what looks like ditch runoff. You rub your hands, the rough towel scraping like sand, while a noblewoman nearby dabs her fingers daintily, her rings glinting. She's not fooling anyone. Her hands were in the same pigsty as yours, metaphorically speaking. National Geographic notes that hand-washing was widespread in medieval Europe, a nod to both cleanliness and godliness, especially before meals. But the irony's thick. You're washing to eat, yet the water's a medieval microbiome, teeming with everyone's dirt. You catch a servant's smirk. She knows the basin's a farce, but pours anyway, her apron stained with the day's chores. The ritual's got rules. Wash in order of rank, don't splash, and for heaven's sake, don't skip it. A merchant fumbles his turn, splashing a knight who glares like he's been spat on. You stifle a laugh, because in this moment, the basin's the great equalizer. Noble or peasant, you're all dunking in the same soup. Someone whispers that clean hands ward off demons, and you roll your eyes, but the fear's real. Superstition clings like damp cloth. Dirty hands invite sickness, or worse, divine wrath. You dry off, the towel now a soggy mess, and join the table, where the bread's as gritty as the fields it came from. The Lord raises his cup, his hands pure, and you wonder if purity's just another medieval scam. Clean hands, filthy world, same old story. Like, share, tell us. Would you trust that basin, or take your chances with the dirt? You're in a dimly lit 1450s London apothecary, the air heavy with the tang of herbs and something sourer, fear maybe. A physician, his robe stained with God knows what, leans over a trembling patient, preaching the dangers of bathing. Too much water, he declares, upsets the humours, blood, phlegm, choler, bile. Wash too often, and you'll be coughing up your soul by dawn. You're just here for a salve, but his words chill you, the room's clammy air sticking to your skin. Medieval medicine's a minefield, and bathing's the fuse. Everyone's obsessed with balancing the body's fluids, but the logic's as murky as the Thames. You glance at the patient, pale and nodding, probably regretting that dip in the bathhouse yesterday. The physician waves a chart, its inky humours drawn like a cosmic map, and you can't help but smirk. They think the body's a stew, and bathing's like dumping in too much salt. Disaster. National Geographic explains that 14th century doctors steeped in Galen's theories believed overbathing opened pores to disease or drained vital spirits. So here you are, surrounded by jars of leeches and dried roots, listening to a man who swears cleanliness is a death sentence. The irony's brutal. You've seen the bathhouse water, a swamp of scum, and you're pretty sure it's not the path to health either. You shift, your boots sticking to the floor, spilled potion, or worse, and catch a whiff of the physician's unwashed cloak. Pot, meat kettle. Outside the city buzzes, but in here it's all grim warnings and sweaty dread. A woman in the corner clutches a rosary, whispering that her fever started after a bath. The physician nods sagely, prescribing a diet of boiled nettles. You want to scream, "It's the water, not the washing," but you'd be branded a heretic. Superstition's the real plague, and it's got everyone second-guessing their scrub. The patient coughs, a wet rasp, and you edge toward the door, suddenly grateful for your own layer of dirt. Bathing's a gamble, too much, and you're unbalanced, too little, and you're a walking stench. The physician drones on, his voice a dirge, and you bolt, the street's filth oddly comforting. Medieval health advice? It's like a bad TikTok trend but deadlier. Like share, what's the worst health tip you've heard? Medieval or modern? You're in a 14th century French monastery, the air thick with incense and something far less divine, body odour so potent it could wake the dead. The monks, clad in musty wool robes, shuffle through vespers, their unwashed scent wafting like a sermon no one asked for. They've sworn off bathing, claiming it's a path to holiness, a sacrifice to keep their souls as pure as their prayers. But as you stand in the pews clutching a rosary, the stench hits like a divine prank. Sweat, grime, and a hint of yesterday's gruel, all mingling in a cloud that makes your eyes water. The congregation gags quietly, handkerchiefs pressed to noses, yet no one dares complain. After all, these are God's men, and their reek is supposedly sacred. The abbot leads the chant, his voice steady, but his robes a patchwork of stains, each one a badge of piety. Medieval monks, as National Geographic notes, often avoided baths to emulate ascetics, believing cleanliness was vanity's trap. Bathing, they argued, distracted from salvation, so they let the dirt pile on, a living testament to their faith. You glance at a young novice, his face pale under a crust of grime, scratching at lice that clearly didn't get the holy memo. The incense swings from a censer, its sweet smoke fighting a losing battle against the funk. A woman in the back coughs, her eyes darting to the door, but she stays. Salvation's worth a few whiffs, right? You're not so sure, especially when a monk's sleeve brushes you, leaving a greasy smear. The absurdity peaks as the abbot preaches on purity, oblivious to the irony. Outside, the world bathes sometimes. But here, the monastery's a shrine to stench, where filth is a halo. You hear a rumour? One monk's odour once drove a demon from the chapel. Or was it the congregation? You smirk, but the air's so thick it's hard to breathe, let alone laugh. The monk's devotion is real, their matted hair and cracked skin proof of their vow, but you can't help thinking heaven might prefer a bar of soap. The service drags, each hymn a nasal endurance test, and you bolt for the door as soon as Amen hits. Fresh air's a miracle, even if it smells faintly of the nearby latrine. Medieval piety is a tough sell when it smells like a grave. Like, share, tell us. Would you pray through that stink or run for the hills? You're in a 1450s Parisian bathhouse, steam curling like ghosts, and the real power isn't the nobles splashing in tubs, it's the women running this chaotic show. A broad-shouldered bathhouse keeper, Margot, heaves a cauldron of scalding water, her arms scarred from years of hauling. She barks at a drunkard pouring at her apron, her voice cutting through the din of laughter and sloshing. These women, keepers, scrubbers, herb mixers, are the backbone of the bathhouse, dodging leers and mopping floors slick with scum. You watch Margot pour water into a tub, the steam stinging your face, and realise she's not just cleaning bodies, she's wrangling a city's worth of egos, filth and secrets. The air's a swamp of sweat and lavender, but the women's work smells of grit. Boiling linens, scrubbing wooden tubs, hauling ash to stoke the fires. National Geographic highlights that women often managed bathhouses, a rare space where they wielded authority in a man's world. Margot snaps at a merchant lingering too long, her eyes sharp as the knife at her belt. Another woman, Jean, grinds herbs for medicinal baths, her hands stained green, ignoring a night's crude jest. You duck as a bucket of dirty water splashes nearby, the floor a hazard of soap and grime. These women navigate chaos with a grit that outshines the nobles' silks, their labour keeping this steamy microcosm alive. Yet the bathhouse is no sanctuary. Men's gazes linger, and whispers of loose morals dog the women's steps. Margot shrugs it off, tossing a rag at a thief trying to nick a bather's purse. She's seen worse. You catch a whiff of rancid tallow from a flickering lamp blending with the tub's bacterial broth. The women's resilience is the real story. They scrub, scold, and survive, turning filth into coin. Jean mutters a prayer, maybe for patience, as she hauls another bucket. You slip on a wet board, catching yourself, and Margot's laugh, gruff, unyielding echoes. This is their domain, a sweaty, slippery empire. Like share. What's the toughest job you've seen, medieval or modern? You're squeezed into a 14th century Florentine bathhouse, Steam so thick it's like wading through fog, and the real action isn't the scrubbing, it's the deals. Merchants, nobles, even shady brokers huddle in the flickering glow of tallow candles, their voices low over the slosh of tubs. You're just trying to rinse off the day's grime, but you can't help eavesdropping as a wool trader leans toward a noble, whispering about a shipment, his words half drowned by a bather's splash. The air's a sour mix of sweat and intrigue, and every tub's a boardroom medieval style. This isn't just a bath, it's where fortunes shift, marriages are brokered, and secrets stick like the scum on the water's edge. A burly bathhouse keeper stomps by, slinging a bucket, her glare keeping the rowdier bathers in check. You catch a whiff of damp wood and rancid soap as a merchant seals a deal with a handshake, water dripping from his beard. Across the room, a noblewoman negotiates her daughter's betrothal, her voice sharp, the steam curling around her like a conspirator. National Geographic notes that bathhouses were social hubs, where the line between hygiene and hustle blurred. You dodge a splash from a drunk who's clearly here for the ale, not the water, and marvel at the chaos. One tub's a marketplace, the next a matchmaking den. The water's murky, a bacterial broth, but nobody cares. They're too busy chasing coin or clout. Someone fumbles a coin purse and it sinks into the tub's muck. Good luck getting that back. You smirk, but the stakes here are high. A bad deal means ruin. A good one means power. A scribe scribbles a contract on damp parchment, his ink smudging, while a knight boasts about his fief, eyeing a lender. The bathhouse hums with ambition, every whisper a gamble. You dunk your head, the water gritty, and surface to hear a deal go sour. A merchant's curse echoes as coins clink elsewhere. It's a sweaty, slippery circus, and you're half tempted to pitch your own scheme. Clean? Hardly. But the bathhouse is where medieval dreams get dirty. Like, share, tell us. What's the shadiest deal you've overheard? Medieval or modern? It's 1360, and you're outside a shuttered London bathhouse. Its doors barred, the once lively tubs now silent. A preacher paces the muddy street, his voice a thunderclap railing against the dens of sin where bathers dared to bare their skin. The air's damp, carrying the faint rot of nearby sewers, but his words burn hotter, accusing bathhouses of alluring souls to vice. You clutch your cloak, half expecting demons to slink from the shadows as passers-by nod grimly. The Black Death's shadow lingers, and bathing's taken the blame. Too much steam, too much flesh, too much temptation. Cleanliness, once a virtue, is now a medieval scandal, and you're caught in the crossfire of piety and paranoia. Inside, the bathhouse is a ghost town, its stone floors slick with abandoned water, the air stale with mould. You remember its heyday, laughter splashing, the clink of coins. Now preachers call it a brothel in disguise, and the city's listening. National Geographic explains that post-plague moral panics linked bathhouses to immorality, shutting many down by the late 14th century. A woman whispers to her friend, mourning the loss of her weekly soak, but she lowers her eyes when the preacher glares. You sidestep a puddle, the street's filth a cruel irony. Bathing's sinful, but mud's just fine. The preacher's sermon peaks, his spit flying. Wash your soul, not your skin. You'd laugh, but the crowd's fervour is unsettling, their torches casting jittery shadows. A lone bather sneaks out a side door, clutching a towel, guilty as a thief. The bathhouse keeper, a grizzled woman, stands defiant, but her livelihood's crumbling. You catch a whiff of old herbs, a faint echo of the tub's glory, and wonder if cleanliness was ever the point. The moral panic's absurd, blaming baths for plague or lust, but it's winning. You turn away, the preacher's voice fading, and smirk at the thought. Ban the tubs, keep the stench. Medieval logic's a cosmic joke. Like, share. What's the weirdest rule you've heard? Medieval or modern? You're in a 14th century Parisian bathhouse. The steam's so dense it clings to your skin like a bad decision. A wiry apothecary, his hands stained green, hovers over a tub where a pale merchant soaks, promising this herbal cure will banish his fever. The water's a murky stew of wilted leaves, nettle, sage, something that smells like it died last week, churning with a slimy residue that sticks to the tub's edge. You're just here to wash, but the stench hits you, bitter, rancid, like a forest's revenge. The merchant grimaces, dunking deeper, convinced this broth will save him. Medieval medicine's a gamble, and this bath's the dice roll. Cure or poison, nobody's sure. You step back, the air stinging your nose, and wonder who thought brewing a swamp was healing. The apothecary mutters about balancing humours, tossing in a handful of crushed roots that make the water fizz ominously. National Geographic notes that medieval bathhouses often doubled as clinics, with herbal baths prescribed for everything from aches to evil spirits. The merchant coughs, the steam curling around his sweat-slick face, and you can't tell if he's hopeful or just desperate. The tub's surface is dotted with floating leaves, some sticking to his chest like leeches. A woman nearby whispers that her gout vanished after a similar bath, but her grimace suggests it wasn't worth the smell. You dodge a splash as the apothecary stirs the tub with a stick, the water now a shade of green that screams "don't touch." Clean? This is more like marinating in a witch's cauldron. The bathhouse hums with the usual chaos. Laughter, splashing, a drunk singing off-key. But this corner's a grim ritual. The apothecary's apron is crusted with dried herbs, his confidence as shaky as the flickering candlelight. You catch a whiff of mould from the tub's wooden slats, blending with the herbal reek, and your stomach churns. The merchant surfaces gasping, his skin blotchy, cured or cursed. He doesn't know, but he paid good coin for this, so he'll endure. You'd laugh, but the apothecary's eyeing you, muttering about your pallor. Nope, you're out. The idea of healing through a rancid soup is peak medieval logic, like fixing a broken leg with a prayer and a kick. Like, share, tell us, what's the worst remedy you've tried? Medieval or modern? Picture a 1450s London bathhouse, steam swirling like a dragon's breath. And in the midst of splashing nobles and grumbling merchants, a gaggle of kids turns a tub into their playground. You're trying to scrub off the market's dirt, but a boy lobs a soggy rag that smacks your shoulder, followed by a chorus of giggles. The water's a cloudy mess, sloshing over the tub's edge as two girls play fight, their shrieks drowning out a night's complaints. These kids are feral, dodging adult elbows and parental shouts, turning the bathhouse into a chaotic water park. You duck as a pebble sails past, plunking into the tub, and the boy grins, unrepentant. Medieval bathing's no picnic, but for these kids it's the best game in town. The bathhouse keeper, a woman with a voice like a cracked bell, yells at the kids to settle, but they're too busy splashing. National Geographic mentions that children often bathed alongside adults, their presence adding to the bathhouse's rowdy vibe. A girl slips, splashing a merchant who curses loud enough to wake the dead, and you can't help but smirk. The water's gritty, flecked with soap scum and who knows what, but the kids don't care. They're diving, splashing, pretending the tub's a pirate ship. A mother grabs her son's ear, dragging him out, his wail echoing off the stone walls. You catch a whiff of damp wood and sour sweat, the air heavy with the bathhouse's usual funk, but the kids' laughter cuts through like a bell. A noblewoman glares, her silk robe safely draped, muttering about urchins ruining her soak. The kids ignore her, one boy flicking water at his sister, who retaliates with a tidal wave. You slip on the slick floor, catching yourself, and a girl offers a cheeky, "sorry," before diving back in. It's chaos, but it's human. Kids finding joy in a world of filth and fear. The tub's a bacterial soup, but to them, it's a kingdom. You rinse off, dodging another splash, and grin despite yourself. Medieval childhood. Half mud, half magic. Like, share. What's the wildest kid chaos you've seen? Medieval or modern? You're wedged in a 14th century Parisian bathhouse, steam curling like a fever dream, and amidst the slosh of tubs and merchants haggling, a lute's twang cuts through the din. A wiry musician, his tunic damp with sweat, perches on a wobbly stool, strumming a tune that's half charm, half desperation. His fingers dance over the strings, coaxing a melody that battles the stench of sour water and unwashed bodies. You're trying to scrub your arms, but his off-key warble about a night's lost love makes you wince. Less romantic, more like a cat in a rainstorm. The bathers cheer anyway, splashing in rhythm, their laughter drowning out the reek of the bacterial broth in the tubs. This guy's no bard, but in this steamy chaos he's the closest thing to entertainment. The air's thick with damp wood and rancid soap, the kind of smell that clings to your skin like bad news. The musician's lute is chipped, his voice cracking as he belts a verse about springtime, which feels like a cruel joke in this swampy haze. National Geographic points out that bathhouses were social hubs, often livened by musicians who masked the grim reality with song. A noble tosses a coin, missing the musician's hat and plunking into a tub. Good luck fishing that out. A washerwoman hums along, her arms elbow deep in a cauldron, while a drunk merchant tries to sing backup, slurring so badly it's a new language. You dodge a splash, the water gritty with who knows what, and catch the musician's eye. He winks, like you're in on the hustle. His next song's about a mermaid, and the bathers roar, some mocking, others enchanted, their voices echoing off the stone walls. The lute's notes falter as steam warps the strings, but he keeps going, sweat beading on his brow. You can't help but admire the grit. Playing through this stench is a feat of willpower. A kid flicks water at him, giggling, and he strums harder, turning the prank into a beat. The bathhouse is a circus, and he's the ringmaster, distracting everyone from the fact that clean is a fantasy here. You rinse off, the water leaving a slimy film, and toss a glance his way. He's already on to a bawdy tavern song, the crowd howling. Medieval karaoke, powered by guts and grime. Like, share, tell us. What's the worst gig you've seen? Medieval or modern? It's a bone-chilling January in 1350s London, and you're in a bathhouse that feels more like an icebox than a sanctuary. The steam's feeble, barely cutting the frost in the air, and the tubs are filled with water so cold it makes your teeth chatter before you even dip a toe. You huddle near a smoky fire, its weak flames spitting ash that mingles with the stench of damp wood and sour sweat. The bathhouse keeper, bundled in a shawl, ladles tepid water from a cauldron, her scowl saying she'd rather be anywhere else. You're here to get clean, but the icy slosh in the tubs looks more likely to give you frostbite than purity. Medieval bathing in winter? It's less hygiene, more survival test. You grit your teeth and dunk a foot, the water like 1,000 needles, and a nearby bather, some poor tanner, curses loud enough to rattle the rafters. National Geographic mentions that bathhouses stayed open year-round, but winter turned them into frigid ordeals, with frozen pipes and half-hearted fires. The tub's wooden slats are slick with ice, the water cloudy with grime from the last guy, who's now shivering by the fire, his lips blue. A noble in a fur-lined cloak soaks in a private tub, slightly warmer but still grim, his servant fanning coals to keep him from bolting. You catch a whiff of charred wood and something fouler, maybe the tanner's boots, and your stomach lurches. Cleanliness is a myth when the water's colder than a gravedigger's handshake. The bathhouse is quieter than usual, the cold damping the usual revelry. A kid huddles by the fire, refusing to bathe, and you don't blame him. The keeper mutters about humours needing warmth, but her chapped hands tell a different story. You scrub fast, your skin numb, and climb out, the floors chill, seeping through your soles. A merchant wraps himself in a blanket, looking like a drowned rat, and you share a grim nod. Winter bathing's a shared misery. The fire crackles, offering just enough heat to keep you from fleeing. Medieval grit. Freeze or stink, your choice. Like share. What's the coldest bath you've braved? Medieval or modern? You're in a shadowy 14th century Parisian bathhouse, where the usual clamour of splashing and gossip fades into an eerie hum. In a corner, an alchemist, his eyes glinting like the copper vials at his belt, prepares a spiritual cleansing bath for a nervous noble. The tub bubbles with a strange brew, mercury-laced water, crushed brimstone, and herbs that smell like a crypt's underbelly. Steam rises in ghostly curls, carrying a metallic tang that stings your throat. You came to wash off the market's grime, but this feels like a ritual to summon something, not banish it. The alchemist chants in low, guttural Latin, his voice blending with the hiss of the potion, and you half expect the water to whisper back. Medieval alchemy's no science. It's a dance with the uncanny, and this bath's the stage. The noble, stripped to his linen shift, hesitates, his face pale as the alchemist stirs the tub with a bone-handled rod. National Geographic notes that bathhouses sometimes hosted alchemical rituals, blending hygiene with mystical quests for purity or immortality. The water's surface shimmers, oily and unnatural, flecked with flecks of something. Ash? Bone? You don't want to know. The alchemist claims this bath will purge the soul's dross, but the noble's trembling hands suggest he's rethinking his quest for enlightenment. You catch a whiff of sulphur, sharp enough to make your eyes water, and step back, the stone floor cold under your feet. A nearby bather mutters about demons hiding in the steam, and for once you don't scoff. The air feels heavy, like it's watching. The alchemist's chants grow louder, the tub's bubbles popping with faint sparks. The noble finally steps in, gasping as the water laps his skin, now blotchy from the heat, or something worse. You'd laugh at the absurdity, bathing to ascend to godhood, but the scene's too unsettling, the steam coiling like a serpent. A candle flickers, casting shadows that twist on the walls, and the alchemist's smile is all teeth, no warmth. You rinse off in a safer tub, its water merely grimy, and keep one eye on the ritual. The noble emerges shivering, claiming he feels reborn, but his wild eyes tell a different story. Alchemy's a gamble, and this bath's a cosmic coin toss. Salvation or madness? Like, share, tell us. What's the weirdest ritual you've seen? Medieval or modern? You're in a 1450s Florentine bathhouse, where the steam smells faintly of lavender. A noble's attempt to class up the usual sweat and scum funk. In a private tub, a young lord, his hair artfully tousled, soaks with a coy smile, his eyes locked on a lady across the room. She's in her own tub, draped in a linen shift, her servant fanning her while she returns his gaze with a practised flutter. This isn't just bathing, it's courtly love, medieval style, where flirtation floats on steamy air and every splash is a sonnet. You're stuck in a communal tub, dodging a merchant's elbow, and roll your eyes at the spectacle. Romance in a bacterial broth? Only nobles could make that sound poetic. The lord's tub is sprinkled with rose petals, a servant pouring scented water that's only slightly less murky than yours. National Geographic highlights that bathhouses were stages for noble courtship, where cleanliness and charm mingled under chivalric pretense. The lady's laughter tinkles, her fingers trailing in the water, but you catch a whiff of the tub's reality. Sour, gritty, hardly the stuff of ballads. A lute player strums nearby, his tune drowning out the slosh of less romantic bathers. The lord recites a verse, comparing her eyes to stars, and you snort. Stars don't swim in slime. Her servant whispers something and she giggles, tossing a glance that's more strategy than swoon. The bathhouse keeper, a sharp-eyed woman, watches the flirtation with a smirk, knowing these pure romances often end in scandal. You scrub your arms, the water leaving a greasy film, and marvel at the noble's delusion. Love's grand, but the tubs are a health hazard. The lord leans forward, offering a silk ribbon, and the lady accepts, her smile a chess move. The steam swirls, candlelight glinting off their damp skin, and for a moment it's almost beautiful. Then a kid splashes nearby and the spell breaks, the lord cursing as water hits his velvet cloak. Courtly love's a pretty lie, drowning in medieval muck. Like, share? What's the cheesiest pickup line you've heard? Medieval or modern? It's 1348, and you stand outside a once thriving London bathhouse. Its heavy oak doors chained shut, the air heavy with the chill of fear and decay. The Black Death has swept through, leaving the city a patchwork of ghost towns, and these tubs, once alive with laughter and steam, are now blamed for spreading the pestilence. You peer through a cracked shutter, glimpsing abandoned tubs, their water stagnant, coated with a film of mould that reeks of neglect. The silence is deafening, broken only by the distant wail of a mourner and the creak of a play cart's wheels. You shiver, not from cold, but from the eerie stillness. The bathhouse's warmth replaced by a dread that clings like damp rot. Bathing, once a ritual of life, is now a death sentence in the city's panicked eyes. The street outside is strewn with straw and ash, the cobblestones slick with rain and worse. A tattered notice nailed to the door warns that bathhouses stir the humours to ruin, a grim decree from priests and physicians who swear the steam carries the plague's miasma. National Geographic explains that the Black Death, killing up to 60% of Europe, sparked paranoia that shut many bathhouses, linking them to disease and sin. You remember the crowds here, nobles, merchants, kids splashing, now replaced by whispers of cursed water. A lone bathhouse keeper lingers nearby, her face gaunt, her livelihood buried with the dead. She mutters about reopening, but her eyes dart to the sky, as if expecting divine wrath. You catch a whiff of mildew and something fouler. death's perfume seeping from the city's wounds. A passerby, cloaked and hooded, crosses himself as he hurries past, avoiding the bathhouse like it's a leper's den. The tubs inside, once brimming with chatter, now hold only echoes, their wooden slats warping in the damp. You recall the irony. These baths were meant to cleanse, yet now they're scapegoats for a plague no one understands. The keeper's hands tremble as she clutches a broom, sweeping nothing but ghosts. You turn away, the air biting, and feel the weight of a city unravelling. Cleanliness abandoned, hope drowned in fear's cold grip. Medieval survival's a cruel joke. Dodge the plague, but don't you dare bathe. Like, share, tell us. What's the creepiest abandoned place you've seen, medieval or modern? You're knee-deep in a freezing stream on the outskirts of a 14th century English village. The water so cold it feels like it's biting your shins. Urban bathhouses are a distant dream. Here, bathing means wrestling with nature's worst. The muddy banks squelch under your feet, reeds tangling your ankles, and a leech latches onto your calf before you can curse. You scrub with a handful of gravel, the only soap this godforsaken stream offers, while a cow upstream stares, unimpressed. The air smells of wet earth and manure, a far cry from the steamy lavender of city tubs. Rural hygiene's no romance. It's a gritty, shivering slog, and you're losing to the mud. A farmer's wife nearby splashes her kids, their squeals echoing as they dodge her attempts to scrub their necks. National Geographic points out that rural folk, far from bathhouses, relied on streams or barrels, making cleanliness a seasonal gamble. The water's murky, swirling with silt and something that might be fish guts, and you wince as a twig scrapes your shin. A boy tosses a pebble, grinning as it splashes you, and you'd glare if your teeth weren't chattering. The wife mutters about city fools with their fancy tubs, but her hands are raw from scrubbing in this icy flow. You spot a frog darting through the reeds, and suddenly the stream feels less like a bath and more like a wildlife documentary. The sun's weak, offering no warmth, and the wind cuts through your damp linen like a knife. A girl slips on the bank, landing in the mud, and her mother's laugh is half exasperation, half resignation. You rinse off, the water leaving a gritty film, and climb out, your skin prickling with cold and leech bites. The village looms ahead, smoke curling from chimneys, and you envy the cows huddling in their warm muck. Rural bathing's a test of grit, nature's spa, complete with bugs and frost. You trudge back, dreaming of a fire, and smirk. At least the stream's free, even if it comes with a side of misery. Like Cher, what's the roughest bath you've taken, medieval or modern? You're in a 14th century London bathhouse, but this corner feels more like a butcher's shop than a spa. A barber, his apron splattered with questionable stains, beckons you to a rickety tub beside a table lined with razors and leech jars. He's offering the deluxe package, a bath to cleanse the humours and a bloodletting to balance them, all in one grim visit. The water's tepid, a cloudy mix of soap and someone else's grime, and the air reeks of iron and damp straw. You hesitate, your skin prickling as he sharpens a blade with a rasp that sets your teeth on edge. Medieval multitasking at its finest. Get clean, get bled, and pray you walk out alive. You sit, the tub creaking, and brace for a service that's half hygiene, half horror show. The barber's hands are steady, but his chatter's nervous, rattling off tales of cured patients, while he sloshes water over your shoulders. National Geographic notes that barbers doubled as surgeons in medieval Europe, their bathhouses serving as makeshift clinics where hygiene met quackery. You catch a whiff of sour blood from a bowl under the table, mingling with the bath's musty steam. He ties a cloth around your arm, his razor glinting, and you flinch as he nicks a vein, the warm trickle mixing with the tub's murk. Keeps the plague at bay, he insists, but his sweaty brow says he's gambling as much as you are. A nearby bather, pale from his own bleeding, mutters a prayer, and you wonder if you're in a bathhouse or a slaughterhouse. The room's a haze of steam and tension, the barber's blade scraping your stubble as he shifts to a shave, his hands now slick with your blood. A kid peeks in, wide-eyed, before the bathhouse keeper shoos him out, her scowl fiercer than the razor. You grit your teeth, the water now a pinkish swirl, and try to focus on the clean part of this ordeal. The barber hums, oblivious to the leech crawling up the tub's edge, and you'd laugh if your pulse weren't racing. Clean and bled, all in one go. Medieval efficiency's a brutal joke. You climb out, woozy, the floor sticky with spilled water and worse. The barber grins, counting his coins, and you stumble away, wondering if dirt was the safer bet. Like Cher, tell us, what's the worst 2-for-1 deal you've survived? Medieval or modern? It's midnight in a 1350s English village, and you're at a moonlit stream, the water black and still, your heart pounding as you clutch a rag to bathe. The village whispers of curses tied to washing under the stars. Bathe at night, and spirits might claim your soul. The air's damp, carrying the scent of moss and something sharper, like fear itself. You dip a toe, the cold biting, and flinch at a rustle in the reeds. Is it wind or something watching? Medieval folklore, as National Geographic hints, wove bathing into tales of bad luck and ghostly wrath, turning a simple scrub into a dance with the supernatural. You're here because the day's mud won't wait, but every splash feels like a dare to the unseen. A woman's voice, low and urgent, drifts from the bank. She's warning her daughter to avoid the water, lest it steal her breath. You scoff, but the stream's surface ripples without a breeze and your skin crawls. The tub in the village bathhouse is no safer. Old men swear its steam hides devils, ready to slip through open pores. You scrub quickly, the gravel in your hand scraping raw, and mutter a prayer to hedge your bets. The moonlight glints off the water, turning it to ink, and a distant owl's hoot sounds too much like a warning. Superstition's grip is iron. Bathe too long, and you'll drown in more than water. Bathe at dusk and ghosts follow you home. You rinse, the chill seeping into your bones, and climb out, glancing over your shoulder. The village is asleep, its thatched roofs barely visible, but the stream feels alive, its whispers louder than the crickets. A twig snaps and you bolt, your damp linen clinging like a shroud. Back home you bar the door, half expecting a spectral knock. Bathing's a risk when every drop's a potential curse. Medieval logic's a haunted house, and you're the fool who wandered in. Like Cher. What's the spookiest superstition you've heard? Medieval or modern? You're in a bustling 14th century Parisian bathhouse, steam swirling like a thief's cloak, and speaking of thieves, one's at work. A lanky figure, eyes darting, slinks along the stone wall, his footsteps muffled by the splash of tubs and the chatter of bathers. You're mid-scrub, your tunic draped over a bench when you spot him rifling through a merchant's pile of clothes, nimble fingers snatching a coin purse before anyone notices. The air's thick with sweat and soap, but the real stink is the audacity. Stealing in a place where everyone's already stripped bare. You clutch your own meagre belongings, the water in your tub gritty with shared grime, and watch the thief weave through the crowd, a shadow in the steam. Medieval bathhouses, as National Geographic notes, were prime targets for pickpockets, where distraction and nakedness made easy prey. The merchant, oblivious, boasts about his wool trade, his laughter booming as the thief slips a silver ring into his sleeve. You'd warn him, but the bathhouse is a circus. Nobles flirting, kids splashing, a lute player mangling a tune, and nobody's paying attention. The keeper, a sharp-tongued woman, hollers at a drunk missing the thief's quiet exit. You catch a whiff of damp wool and rancid tallow from a flickering lamp, the chaos masking the crime. A noblewoman shrieks, realizing her silk scarf's gone, and the room erupts in indignant shouts, bathers scrambling to check their piles. The thief's long gone, probably laughing in an alley. While you grip your tunic tighter, the water's bacterial soup suddenly the least of your worries. The irony's rich. A place meant for cleansing breeds its own kind of filth. A kid points at the noblewoman, giggling, and you smirk. Medieval drama's better than any tavern brawl. The merchant finally notices his missing purse, his roar shaking the rafters, but it's too late. You rinse off, the water leaving a slimy film, and climb out, dodging a stray splash. The bathhouse hums on, undeterred, a sweaty microcosm of human greed and grit. Steal a shirt, dodge the stench. Same old story, like Cher. Tell us, what's the sneakiest theft you've witnessed, medieval or modern? You stand in the fading steam of a 14th century London bathhouse. The tub's now quiet, their water cooling into a murky stillness. The air's heavy with the ghost of sweat, herbs, and human stubbornness, a reminder of the chaos you've waded through. Nobles soaking in rosewater, monks reeking of piety, thieves slipping through shadows. Medieval bathing was a paradox, a chase for purity in a world caked in filth, where every dunk was a gamble with disease or divine wrath. You trace a finger along a tub's splintered edge, its wood worn by countless hopes, and marvel at the resilience it took to keep scrubbing. National Geographic calls bathhouses social hubs, but they were more arenas of defiance, where humans fought grime with grit, even if the water was more foe than friend. The candles flicker, their light dancing on the damp stone walls, and you hear the distant echo of a bather's laugh, a sound that lingers like a heartbeat. From alchemists brewing mystic baths to kids splashing in bacterial soup, this place was a stage for humanity's contradictions, vain, devout, scheming, surviving. The Black Death would soon shut these doors, blaming steam for what rats carried, but even that couldn't erase the drive to be clean, to be whole. You step outside, the night air sharp, carrying the city's usual stench, sewers, smoke, life. The bathhouse taught you something. Humans cling to rituals, even flawed ones, because they're proof we're still here, still fighting. The tubs are empty now, but their story isn't. Every slosh was a small rebellion against chaos. You glance back, the bathhouse's silhouette fading into the dark, and feel a strange respect for those who soaked, schemed, and sang through the muck. Cleanliness was a dream, but the effort was real, a testament to a species too stubborn to quit. Like, share. Tell us, what's the messiest fight for hope you've seen, medieval or modern? You're in the heart of a 15th century French town, weaving through a market where the air's a wall of rot, spoiled fruit, fish guts, and the ever-present tang of human waste. Yet, the locals stroll, haggle, and laugh, calling this stench the scent of home, their noses immune to the assault. A vendor waves a bruised apple, shouting prices as flies buzz over a pile of trampled cabbage. You gag, the odour like a punch. But a baker nearby shrugs, kneading dough with a grin, as if the reek's just part of the vibe. BBC Bite-Size highlights that medieval townsfolk grew accustomed to their filthy streets, normalising a miasma that'd make modern noses flee. This is their normal, a gritty love letter to chaos. A girl skips past, humming, unbothered by the slimy cobblestones or the whiff of an overflowing gutter. You dodge a cart, its load of hides adding a leathery funk to the mix, and marvel at the resilience. Life thrives here, stench and all. A woman barters for eggs, her scarf slipping, and you catch her smile like the market's rot is perfume. The town's pulse is stubborn, its people weaving joy through filth. You adjust your cloak, the air clinging like damp wool, and smirk. Medieval hometown pride's a nose-blind masterpiece. Like Cher, what's the weirdest normal you've seen? Medieval or modern? You're navigating a 14th century Parisian street, a slimy gauntlet of dung and discarded scraps, when a noble teeters past on platform shoes, his velvet cloak flapping like a flag of privilege. These chopines, wooden stilts strapped to his feet, lift him above the muck, but his wobble betrays the effort. Each step's a gamble against a face-first dive into the filth. The air's thick with the reek of sewage and rotting cabbage, and you stifle a laugh as a street kid jeers, tossing a pebble that nearly topples him. BBC Bite-Size notes that nobles wore high shoes to avoid the medieval streets, rivers of stench, a fashion statement born of desperation. You sidestep a puddle of something foul, your own boots sinking, and envy his elevated escape, even if he looks like a stork in a storm. A crowd gathers, some mocking, others gaping, as the noble servant steadies him, sweat beading under his feathered cap. His silk hose, once pristine, now sport a suspicious stain. Gravity's a harsh critic. You catch a whiff of the street's signature perfume, a blend of manure and despair, and marvel at his commitment to dignity in this cesspool. A woman cackles, pointing as he lurches forward, his shoppings clacking on a rare dry cobblestone. Fashion meets survival, but the street's the real winner, its slime mocking his every step. You trudge on, the ground sucking at your soles, and grin. Noble or not, nobody outruns the stink. Like, Cher. Tell us. What's the most ridiculous way you've dodged a mess? Medieval or modern? You're passing a 15th century English tannery, and the stench hits like a fist. Urine. rotting hides, and a sour tang that burns your lungs. Vats bubble with acrid sludge, where workers soak leather in piss and dung, their faces grim as they stir the foul brew. You gag, eyes watering as a gust carries the reek across the street, blending with the town's usual sewage funk. BBC Bitesize explains that tanneries were notorious for adding their unique stench to medieval towns. Their chemical stink a grim necessity for leather goods. A tanner, his hands stained and raw, coughs into a rag, ignoring the flies swarming his vat. This is no job. It's a sentence, and the whole town pays the price in nosebleeds. A cart rolls by, piled with fresh hides, their bloody scent mixing with the tannery's reek, and you hurry past, your cloak pressed to your face. A worker dumps a bucket into a vat, the splash sending up a cloud of ammonia that could strip paint. Locals shuffle by, heads down, accustomed to the odour but not immune, their grimaces telling the real story. You spot a kid holding his nose, giggling, and you join him if you weren't choking. The tannery is a grim engine of survival, turning flesh into goods at the cost of breathable air. Beauty's price is brutal, and you're just glad you're not knee-deep in it. Like, share. What's the worst smell you've endured? Medieval or modern? You're elbowing through a 14th century English market, where the cobblestones are a swamp of squashed vegetables, fish guts, and mystery sludge that sticks to your boots like a curse. The air's a choking blend of rotting produce and sour ale, with flies buzzing like they're running the show. A vendor hawks wilted turnips, his hands slick with grime, while a fishmonger's stall oozes a briny stench that could knock out a horse. You dodge a trampled cabbage, its leaves mashed into the muck, and gag as a whiff of spoiled herring hits you. BBC Bitesize notes that medieval markets were chaos hubs, where waste piled up as fast as the deals, turning commerce into a sensory assault. This is no farmer's market. It's a landfill with a sales pitch. A baker shouts over the din, his bread speckled with dubious grit, while a kid slips in the slime, laughing as he splatters a passing monk. You sidestep a puddle of fishy ooze, your cloak brushing a pile of rotting apples that hum with flies. The haggling's fierce, voices rising over the squawk of caged hens. But the stench is the real king here, ruling every breath. A woman barters for eggs, unfazed by the ground's sticky grip, her smile as stubborn as the muck. You marvel at the madness. Shopping in this filth is peak medieval grit. Fresh? Barely. It's a market where you buy dinner and dodge disease in one go. Like, share, tell us, what's the grossest market you've braved? Medieval or modern? You stand at the edge of a 15th century French town, the stench of sewage, livestock and rotting scraps fading as you catch a rare breath of cleaner air. The streets behind you, a maze of slimy cobbles and buzzing flies, are a testament to human endurance, where locals lived, loved, and laughed amid a miasma that'd make modern noses flee. BBC Bitesize highlights that medieval townsfolk adapted to their filthy world, weaving life through the reek with stubborn resilience. You recall the market's chaos, the chamber pot's reign, the tanner's acrid vats, yet the town pulsed with defiant joy, vendors shouting, kids playing, lovers flirting. The stench was their backdrop, a grim stage for humanity's unyielding spirit. A woman passes, her basket brimming with bruised apples, her laughter cutting through the lingering odour like a blade. You see a cart driver whistle, his tune defiant against the street's muck, and feel a grudging respect. These people didn't just survive the stink, they owned it, calling it home with a shrug and a grin. The air's still heavy, a faint whiff of dung clinging, but it's the sound of life, clattering wheels, chattering voices that lingers most. Medieval towns were a mess, but their heartbeat was fierce, proof that humans can thrive in chaos. Like, share. What's the toughest environment you've seen people conquer? Medieval or modern? You're trudging through a 14th century London street, and calling it a street is generous. It's a river of filth, a slimy stew of mud, dung, and whatever got tossed from last night's supper. The cobblestones, where they exist, are slick with grime, buzzing flies swarming like they own the place. You gag, the air a punch of rotting fish and human waste, thick enough to coat your tongue. No sewers here, just open gutters where slop flows freely, a medieval highway of stench. You dodge a puddle that's more sewage than rain, your boots squelching, and a rat scurries past, unbothered. Welcome to urban life, where the streets are a landfill and fresh air is a cruel myth. A market stall nearby hawks wilted cabbages. The vendors shout, barely cutting through the stench. BBC Bite-Size notes that medieval towns lacked sanitation, with waste dumped directly onto streets, creating a miasma locals somehow endured. A cart lumbers by, its wheels splattering muck, and you leap aside, cursing as a speck hits your cloak. A woman empties a bucket from a window above, not even glancing down, and you're grateful it's just vegetable peelings. This time, the street's a living beast, churning with slop and indifference, yet people bustle on, haggling, laughing, living. You sidestep a pile of something unidentifiable, the flies claiming it as their throne, and smirk. Medieval plumbing's a no-star review. Like, share, tell us, what's the foulest street you've walked, medieval or modern? It's dawn in a 15th century French town and you're weaving through narrow streets when a shout, "Garde low," sends you diving for cover. Too late. A chamber pot's contents splash from a window above, a rancid cascade of last night's business missing you by inches. The cobblestones glisten with fresh filth, the air now a choking blend of urine and despair. You curse, shaking your cloak as the culprit, a bleary-eyed housewife, slams her shutters without a glance. Medieval towns, as BBC Bite-Size describes, had no sanitation systems, so chamber pots were emptied wherever gravity allowed, turning streets into obstacle courses of dirty rain. You glare upward, but another window creaks, and you bolt, heart racing. A merchant nearby wipes his brow, muttering about city perfume, his hat splattered from an earlier miss. The street's a minefield, pedestrians dodging with practiced steps, some clutching wide-brimmed hats like shields. A kid giggles, pointing at a noble's stained velvet, and you can't help but snort. Nobody's safe from the sky's foul gifts. The stench clings, a sour fog that makes your eyes water, yet the town hums with life, vendors shouting, carts creaking. You duck under an awning, the ground sticky, and marvel at the chaos. Living here's a game of dodgeball with sewage. Like, share, what's the worst thing you've dodged? Medieval or modern? You step into a 14th century English peasant's home, and the first thing that hits you is the smell. A pungent cocktail of manure, damp straw, and last night's stew. A pig snuffles in the corner, its snout buried in a pile of scraps, while a clutch of chickens clucks and struts across the dirt floor, dodging a toddler's grabby hands. The air's thick, smoky from the hearth, blending with the ripe funk of livestock living rent-free in the family's one-room hovel. You cough, your eyes watering, as the farmer's wife sweeps dung into a corner like it's just another chore. BBC Bite-Size explains that medieval homes often housed animals for warmth and security, turning living spaces into barnyards. This is no cosy cottage, it's a zoo with worse ventilation. A rooster crows, startling you, and a feather floats into your lap, mocking your attempt to sit on a wobbly stool. The pig grunts, eyeing your boots like they're lunch, and you shift, the floor sticky underfoot. The farmer, unbothered, tosses a crust to the chickens who squawk in a frenzy, scattering straw. You'd laugh at the chaos, but the stench is a physical weight, like breathing through a soggy rag. The wife hums, stirring a pot, as if the manure pile by the door's just decor. Pet or dinner? In this house they're both, and the line's blurry. Medieval multitasking, cuddle your livestock, then eat it. Like, share, tell us, what's the messiest roommate you've had? Medieval or modern? You're standing in a 1348 Florentine street, but it's no street anymore. It's a graveyard, silent save for the creak of a plague cart's wheels and the faint wail of mourners. Bodies pile against walls, wrapped in tattered shrouds, their stench of rot so thick it clogs your throat. The air's heavy, a mix of decay and fear, as flies buzz over cobblestones slick with who knows what. The Black Death, as Medium notes, killed up to 60% of Europe, turning bustling towns into eerie husks. You step carefully, avoiding a limp hand protruding from a cloth, and shudder at the stillness. No market cries, no laughter, just death's heavy shadow. A lone dog howls, scavenging, and you clutch your cloak as if fabric could shield you from the reaper. A cart lumbers past, piled high with corpses, The driver's face hidden behind a rag, his eyes hollow. You catch a whiff of something worse than sewage, sweet sickly decay that lingers like a curse. Houses stand shuttered, their windows